Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fighter Heart podcast. I'm sitting here with Kayla. Thanks for joining us, Kayla.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So we like to get into it right away. I'm gonna just ask you to, give us a little brief rundown of about who you are, a little bit on your background, and then give us your Fighter Heart story, and then we'll take it from there. I'll ask a few questions here and there.
Fantastic. So I'm Kayla. I live out in Western Colorado currently. Originally from South Dakota. I uh, I am a dog mom of three, and that's pretty much my entire life right now is entertaining these guys. And then a big runner, and so I really enjoy that as well. I
There's one of
Speaking
them.
of speaking of one who decided to interrupt, um, I a little bit about my story is I the Reader's Digest version is I slipped on ice and I lost my leg, and we'll go into that a little bit more. But I I want to remind people that it's okay that if you have something traumatic happen from something seemingly so simple, it's uh it's okay because it can't be as clumsy as I can. Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Well,
Um,
so
yeah,
how long ago did you slip on the ice? Kind of walk us through that day.
yeah. So it was about 7.5 years ago that I was working at a wastewater plant, and I went out to collect some samples and came out of a building and just slipped right there, fresh out of the building. Um, I rolled my foot and ankle really hard, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. I went back inside, I told my boss, and they sent me to the urgent care. And the urgent care doctor's like, just stay off it for a little bit. They put me in a boot, and a week later, I was still hobbling around and I still had pain in my foot. I was like, that's kind of odd, you know? You don't typically like roll an ankle and, stay off it and then it's fine. But
So
so I went back
you didn't
to
know it was broken?
nope. So actually it took a whole year to find out that my foot was broken. I saw 12 different doctors in South Dakota. Went to intensive physical therapy. I had steroid shots. I went to all these specialists. They took MRIs of my foot. I mean, the whole gamut of tests. And not one person in South Dakota could find a reason that I still had pain so long after my initial slip on the ice. Um, and then it happened by chance, my partner at the time, I got a job offer down here in Western Colorado, so we moved here, and I saw a physician here in Fruita, Colorado, and he was like, "Oh yeah, the images that you brought me from South Dakota showed you have a broken bone in your foot." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. I've been walking on a broken foot for a whole year." So super wild.
How is that even
Did
possible? How do you walk on a broken foot? Were you just like ignoring the pain?
Pretty much. For the most part, I just kind of like went from being this really active runner, hiker, volleyball player to I just barely walked around the house. Anything other than a completely flat surface would just feel like someone just stabbed my foot. Um, and so I just stopped moving altogether pretty much. And so like 6 months after meeting this doctor, he's like, "Hey, we gave it another shot. We gave it another try on these like natural remedies and didn't work. And at this point, it's been a year and a half. Let's just have surgery. Let's fuse it. Let's fix it. Let's get you back moving again." I was like, "Great. Sounds fantastic." And so I had the surgery um about 6 years ago now. And went through this whole slew of physical therapy to regain some strength and try to get back to running, but I never quite got there. I'd go maybe 2 miles and my foot would be in constant pain. And I just was so weak and so tired. And so I just kind of kept walking, and that was about it. Um, And then, unfortunately, a year and a half after that surgery, I felt the same stabbing pain that I had before. And I went back into the doctor's and I was like, hey, what's going on? Because it feels like a broken bone again. And come to find out, some of the hardware in the foot where they had fused the bone failed, and it broke the bone next to the original break. So uh,
Wait, so
we
they
went,
broke a bone trying to fix the broken bone?
yeah. So when they put in these, they put in a plate and some screws, and then this plastic band, rubber band like thing to kind of hold the foot together while you have this metal raw or metal plate just kind of holding your broken bone together. Um, and the pressure of that rubber band ended up like shifting the weight so much that it broke the bone next to the original break. So it was unfortunate. um, and so it's the wildest series of unfortunate events and that you could
Yeah.
ever think of. And then so I went through some more treatments and we tried to fix it naturally and tried to heal it without going through surgery. And that didn't work. COVID hit in the midst of like scheduling this all. So COVID hits. I'm waiting for the surgery, and September of 2020 was uh was when we finally got me back on the operating table to like clean it out, get new hardware in, fix the other bone, and just kind of like move on. And I jokingly told the surgeon right beforehand, I was like, if we have to keep doing this, can we just cut my leg off now? um, not knowing that that would actually happen at the time. So, so I got up from that surgery, and from there, I never could have imagined the amount of pain that I would have experienced. I the day after the surgery, it still felt like they were actively cutting into my foot. And I hit like 3 weeks post-op, and I was still non-weight bearing. My incision hadn't healed at all. I had this like gaping wound on the top of my foot. And the doctor was like, you're slowly healing, but like at this point, 3 weeks out, like the pain level is still high. It's starting to be concerning, but we're going to give it a few more weeks. Um, and then I hit the 8 week post-op mark, and it still felt like they were just actively cutting into my foot. I couldn't weight bear at all, even after they released me to start walking again. And my incision hadn't hardly healed at all. Um, and so the doctors were like, well, something's not quite right here. So for the next couple weeks, we did some tests. We tried to debride the wound just to like stimulate healing. I tried different ointments and medicines and things like that. And I hit 3 months post surgery and was diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome. I, at the time, had no idea what that meant. But I knew from the amount of pain I was in that it was quite severe. Um, I it's a very rare nerve malfunction, and essentially what happens is your nerves act as a um wires in a computer, with your brain being your computer board. So in a typical functioning system, you're going to put on a soft sock, your body is going to recognize it's a soft sock. Your brain is going to interpret that signal as a soft sock, and it's going to say, oh, that's cozy, that's nice, that's a good thing. But with the CRPS, what happens is these nerves go into hyperdrive. And so putting on a soft, fuzzy sock felt like it was my foot was being crushed by an elephant. And a light breeze across the top felt like someone was dragging razor blades across it. And
So,
so,
so did you develop the CRPS because of the surgeries?
so CRPS is kind of a funky beast. It's caused CRPS is developed when your nerves encounter some sort of trauma. So it could be surgery, it could be a needle prick from an IV, it could be a paper cut, it could be a whole slew of things, from anything from really minor, like a paper cut, to something major, like multiple surgeries. Um, our best guess at this point is because of all of the treatments, procedures, and physical therapies that I tried while I had my broken foot, there was a lot of trauma to that area because they were treating something that they were treating it like it wasn't a broken foot. And so it just caused a lot of trauma. I was wearing those cam walking boots for years, which is really damaging to your feet. The surgeries is another set of traumas, the incisions, the all of the culmination of thing was just a lot of trauma to those nerves in my foot. And so that's kind of how it happens,
So not
unfortunately.
so not initially when you slipped and fell, it was probably after that, or maybe the
It's
boots.
yeah, it could have been any one of the things that my foot was just like, nope, I'm done. This is it. We're going overdrive right now. So and that's the unfortunate part with the CRPS. And based off of how I felt after that first surgery, I likely had it then just because of like the pain after like moving a few miles, like I would just have that pain there. But it wasn't bad enough at that point to be like diagnosed, which is unfortunate because with CRPS, one of the things that helps put it into remission is the earlier the treatment and the earlier the like you get on top of it, the likelihood of it going into remission is like really high.
Mm.
So, but I unfortunately was not that person. And so it was quite an ordeal for the next year. So from a year from my foot surgery, I had a 46 out of 50 on the McGill pain scale, which is like the most painful thing you could ever imagine in this entire world. And I never thought I would ever imagine anything like that. Um, and the kinds of treatments that you have to go through to put CRPS into remission are spinal cord injections, nerve blocks, spinal cord surgeries. Like you go through this really intensive, like physical therapies, pills, creams. Like you try everything. I actually even tried witchcraft. Like it was to that point where like I couldn't eat, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep without like just excruciating amounts of pain. And so it just wore me down. I lost a lot of friends throughout this journey because they didn't understand what I was going through. My foot was like a dark purple color. It was ice cold all the time. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. And I became very depressed through it all. And one of the things with CRPS is it's known as the suicide disease. Um, because most of the people that experience CRPS will have some sort of suicidal ideation or suicide attempts during their treatment because of how painful this disease is. And I was one of those people. So it was a lot to say the least, but um,
So
so
so let's get on a timeline kind of. So mid 2020 is when you first started getting surgery around there.
yeah, September of 2020 is when I had my second foot surgery. And then December of 2020 is when I got diagnosed with the CRPS. So all in the midst of COVID. So
Yeah,
this is like not the most ideal time.
no.
Um, and so from December until about June, I went through multiple spinal cord injections, nerve blocks. Um, I had my very first nerve block that I had, spinal cord injection. The very first one I had was in January, and that one sent me to the ER because the doctor botched that one and hit the wrong nerve, and I lost function to my right leg for 6 weeks. And so I ended up with medical PTSD because of a lot of that kind of stuff. And I went through getting bounced around from doctor to facility to hospital because every time I made it to another doctor, they were like, I tried one thing and I touched you and it got way worse. So here's the next guy you can go see. And so that was for 6 months, just bouncing around. I made it from here to Vail, Colorado, to the Stedman Clinic, and finally got there, and they tried a spinal cord stimulator, where they place these really long, like 12-inch wires inside your spinal column, to try and trick your nerves into not sending that overstimulated response back to your brain. And unfortunately, that was the point where I reached that max pain level. I woke up during surgery. I was in that much pain. I couldn't move afterwards. I couldn't eat solid food afterwards, because anytime I even moved my mouth to take a bite was just excruciating pain throughout my entire body.
Oh, so it's not just your
It
foot
was
that hurts, it's your whole body.
it got to the point where the amount of pain in my foot made me not be able to sleep, not be able to eat. And so I started hallucinating. I lost 30 pounds in a month. I was like on my deathbed. And it was at that point after that surgery that I called a bunch of surgeons, and I was like, if you can't get me in to cut my leg off to even try this, because at this point, like, it's either you cut my leg off or I'm not making it to Christmas. Like, I just wholeheartedly believed that, because of how rapidly I was declining. Um, and thankfully, there was a surgeon out in Denver who's like, I've done it successfully. If you want to come visit me, I'll see if I can do it for you. And I was like, thank God. So I flew out to Denver. Um,
Were were
in
were other surgeons saying they wouldn't do it?
Yes.
Oh,
So when you have a disease like CRPS, the other thing with it, along with being excruciatingly painful and the fact that you'll never fully get rid of it and it'll just go into remission, is the fun fact that if you injure another part of your body, it can potentially spread to that part of the body. So if I cut my thumb on my left arm, instead of it just being in my right foot, it could go into my left arm.
oh,
And so every surgeon that would like touch my body or like try to operate, like the surgeon that tried to do the spinal cord stimulator, and it just made it worse. So like it was originally contained into like the foot area. But then it started to spread upwards through the ankle. And so having to go through all of that was quite an ordeal, because all these surgeons were like, yeah, no, if it's spreading now, I'm not going to touch you because it could potentially spread to your whole body, and that would be the worst. And I was like, okay, well, somebody has to help me. Um,
and
and so
you were
thankfully,
willing to give it a try no matter what, no matter who.
at
Yeah,
when and this is the thing, like making the decision in the moment was like one of the easiest decisions that I could have made, because I was on my deathbed. I had no other choice, and this was like the last Hail Mary. And if it didn't work, I knew I wasn't going to make it anyways. So it's like, it's either going to work or it's not. And I'm
yeah,
either going to live or I'm not. So like, it's gotta, I don't want to die, but I have no other choice right now.
yeah.
Um, and so like going through making that choice as well was such an impossible decision for everybody around me, it felt like, because my sister's a physician, and so she was telling me all the horror stories about losing your limb and all these things, and still in heavy amounts of COVID in 2021, so you can't go to the hospital with your support system. You're going into this thing alone pretty much. So it is a full-on journey all by myself at this point. And it was I lost a lot of support from a lot of friends and family when I let them know, like, this is the choice I'm making, because if I don't, I'm going to not make it. And that was a really hard way to learn who really supported you unconditionally and who didn't.
Why would
Um
they support you anyway? It's your foot. You know, why do they
You
care?
know, that's a question that I just asked my mom this earlier today was like, why do people not have empathy? Like, why the world would be a better place if people just had a tiny bit more empathy. Um,
It's not even their
but
business anyway, though, is my point. It's like your foot, you decide what you want to do with it, you know?
yeah, just send me some good vibes and like that's all I'm asking for. Just send me good vibes that it's gonna work. Cause
Yeah,
like at that point, like I wasn't gonna see them at Christmas anyways. Like I was gonna expire. So it
yeah.
was it was an interesting time and it's a very emotional process and I I'm very glad that now I get to help people through that process because I'm finding there's a lot of people that go through the same situation where they lose their loved ones support through all of this journey. And I remember feeling so isolated during all of this. And I remember feeling like the most alone I've ever felt in my life when I made that choice. And I had to live with that choice for 6 weeks while I waited for my surgeon to recover from hip replacement because he had to go have that done. And I was like, well, hopefully he makes it out of that so I can lose my leg to him because, like, I don't know what else is going to happen. Um, so it was it's a very emotional journey and a lot of people don't understand that like when you go through this process like you are so alone and because people don't lose limbs around you every day like you don't get to experience sense of loss of part of your life and so it's very difficult during all of that.
You could imagine. So rewind a little so you got the call from the surgeon in Denver. What happened when you
Yes.
first got there?
I hobbled in on my little knee crutch and I was already in tears because I was like, if this guy doesn't agree to cut my leg off, like I might just, go down to a beach in Mexico and just like sip pina coladas till I expire because like I don't know what else I'm gonna do. Like I was in tears. He came into the room, he looked at me, he looked at my foot, and he's like, all right, here's our game plan. And I was like, wait, what? We can do this?
There's a
And
game plan.
I was like, oh my God, this is, I was sobbing in his office and he's like, yeah, so this is how I've done it successfully. He goes, I don't guarantee that it's going to be successful. He goes, I know this is a difficult thing and it's a very like, it's such an unstudied disease because it is so rare. Um, and so he's like, I've done it successfully on over a dozen people. So how rare it is over a dozen, just over a dozen. So
That's a good amount.
yeah, it's enough to convince me to do it.
Yeah.
But he had this game plan of like, okay, this is what worked for these past patients. We had all these pain management teams where we, had epidurals and nerve blocks and ketamine and all these like medicines to mediate any sort of pain pre-amputation and post-amputation. So like they are going above and beyond what normal people experience in an amputation. Typically in an amputation, you might get a nerve block and then like some, morphine or something afterwards and just kind of like Tylenol to just mitigate the pain as it comes.
Yeah.
But he was like, nope, we're not messing around. We're doing the full gamut of pain management. I was like, okay, cool, great, love that. And he's talked about how in the previous patients, they amputated at least 6 inches above any sort of symptom. So skin color changes, temperature changes, hypersensitivity, pain, any of that. So he like made a heavy note and like made sure that where like the skin color changes on me were just above my ankle an inch or so. And so, we had to amputate 6 inches above that because that was like as high as the symptom got, that we could tell. And so we made sure that there was a game plan. Made sure that everything was ready to go. And he's like, all right, it's a 50-50 shot if it works. So I'll see you on September 30th. And I was like, hey, sounds great.
How long was that?
Um,
What month were you there?
so
So,
I was there on August 9th of 21.
oh,
And then my surgery was September 30th. So I had about 6 weeks of living with this decision and living with the most excruciating pain of my life and what I never wish upon any other human being because it is but by the time I got to the operating table, I was hallucinating. The grass was blue, the sky was green. I was on another planet because I hadn't slept in weeks, and I was truly like I had accepted dying on the operating table at that point. I was like, well, I'm either gonna die or I'm not. So I'm either gonna get a nap or I'm gonna get a permanent nap. So
So
I
you
was
didn't
like,
have
holy
that
buck.
in those 6 weeks, you didn't have any doubts of like maybe I shouldn't do this?
At that point, I didn't, because of how extreme the pain was. It, and it's so hard to explain it to people who don't experience chronic pain or any sort of like super traumatic event, because it is such a unimaginable pain. Um, just like I said, like putting on a sock, putting the last 6 weeks, if I tried to put on even a sandal that had like a little strap to put on, if that strap brushed my skin, my blood vessels would rupture, and so then it would just cause mass chaos because my foot would fill with blood, and then it would just go into this like excruciating amount of pressure, which would cause so much more pain, which would feel like my foot was being crushed by like a 3-ton elephant. Like it was just like the most insane amount of pain that anybody could go through. So during those last 6 weeks, there was zero regrets.
No
It was
doubt.
like, well, I'm either, like I said, I'm either gonna die or I'm not. So it was, it was, this was my chance to live. And I promised myself during those last 6 weeks that if I got the chance to live again, that I would do everything in my power to enjoy every single day, because I got a second chance. And I I went and saw my Reiki master the week before, and she like helped me run the bad energy from my head down into my foot so we could just amputate all the bad energy. And she gave me this tiny little heart-shaped rock, and she infused it with her energy, and she said, "Take this rock with you into surgery." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good." I don't know what else to say.
Nothing
So
to lose.
yeah, got into the surgery center, and I was sitting, my dad got to go with me, which was really nice that they like the week before I went in, they allowed one visitor. And so I got to have my dad with me for the pre and post amputation. But I got in there and I looked at the anesthesiologist and was like, "Can I tape this rock to my hand, please? It has to go with me." And he's like, Okay, I've never heard of that, but sure,
Yeah,
we can try."
yeah, let's tape it to her. Do what she
Yeah.
says. Yeah.
So that's and like 2 days before I had my amputation, I read an obscure article that somebody got to see their severed limb, and it helped like alleviate all their phantom pain. Like once they saw their actual severed limb, like they were golden. They never had phantom pain. So I was like, okay, cool. The internet says I just have to look at my legs. So I had my phone with like 10% battery to the surgeon. I was like, "Can you please take a picture of my severed limb?" And he was like, "What?" It's like, "Just trust me. I'm throwing in all the cards because I don't know if this is gonna work, but if it does, I'm gonna make it work."
Yeah.
And I'm sure to this day I was probably one of the craziest patients he had going into that. Um, but I remember how I was like, they started giving me I had some anti-anxiety meds. I started feeling relaxed, and I was like, "You know what? I feel like I'm ready for a nap." And the doc's like, "Great, have a good nap." And I woke up from that surgery and instantly like sat up, and I sobbed. I was just sobbing. And the doctor runs in, the nurses run in. They're like, "What is happening?" I was like, "I don't have pain." And
Wow.
I was just, I couldn't stop sobbing because I was just, for the first time in 7 years, I didn't have pain whatsoever. Like, and it
And you didn't
was
even
like,
have to see the limb.
No, at that point I hadn't.
Yeah. And you
At
didn't
that
feel
point I
pain.
hadn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was such a moment for me because I still feel that same like gratefulness that I get to be alive. Like the fact that I woke up even was like I woke up, I didn't have pain, and it would just like all hit me of like, I have a second chance at life. I get to live again. And it was such a like tears of joy never happened before I lost my leg. And I have cried more tears of joy
Mhm.
than I have ever cried in my life.
Oh,
um,
amazing.
so and that was kind of the beginning of the last almost 3 years now, which is wild. I still feel like it was yesterday. Um, but yeah, so I got up and I made it my mission from the time I woke up that I was going to make the best of the rest of my life. Um, and on day 4, I was telling the doctor that I needed to get out of this hospital, and I was hopping up and down the halls with an epidural in my back, just trying to prove that I could do it, just so I could leave. Um, and the next day, my mom stayed with me for a few days afterwards in a hotel, and we stayed there. And she took me to the aquarium, to the zoo, and we just like bebopped around Denver so I could get out and move again because I was like, everything is amazing. I got to take a nap. I have no more pain. I was like, this is the best day ever.
Yeah,
um,
you slept for the first time in 7 years, basically.
yeah, yeah, it was so nice. Um, and yeah, so after those first 2 weeks, I got cleared to come back home and start like prepping my body to wear a prosthetic because I was on the road to recovery finally, and I didn't have any CRPS symptoms showing. And thankfully, it's been in remission since my amputation, so I'm super thankful about that. Um, and the first 3 months after the amputation, I slept so much.
Yeah, I'm sure. You
If
gotta catch up.
I I took a nap like every hour at least for the first little bit, and I uh I got the all clear to go back to work after a month, and I rolled into my office and I realized I hated my job. I was like, "Can I have short-term disability so I can keep napping and healing?" And they're like, "Sure, great. Sounds good." So as in between my naps, I would get up and I'd apply for jobs, and I I was like, "I gotta find something that I can do something better with my life." And so just at the end of that 3-month mark, I finally found a job as a manager in an assisted living facility. And I had no experience whatsoever for this job, but I hobbled in on my little crutches and my prosthetic, and I was like, I know I can be good at this job. And the lady was like, okay, we'll give you a shot. Like, sounds like a plan. And
Wow.
it was one of the best job experiences I've had ever because somebody like believed in me, and I was like, cool, I love this. And
What was the job?
I
What did you say it was?
it was a manager at an assisted living facility.
Oh,
So
okay.
just managing people in the facility and things like that. And it's very fun. And the very first interview I had my leg for maybe 4 days. Maybe. I was I was still struggling how to learn how to use it because my brain remembered all the pain that I had. And so I couldn't take a full step on it because my brain would freak out. And so I was trying to learn to walk, learn to do this new job. And so I'd get done with work and just come home and sleep for 12 hours. And
Were you on
um
crutches or anything?
I used crutches and a walker a lot. Um at the beginning, I didn't get rid of my crutches or my walker until about 7 months post-op. Just because I really struggled with learning how to walk. A lot of people, it's very humbling now when I get to work with other people who have amputations and they get their prosthetic. It's the 6 week mark post op, and they're just up and walking that same day. And I'm just like, wow, that's amazing. And they feel so crummy when they have to use a cane like for a week. And I'm like, I use a walker and crutches for 7 months. Like I struggled, and it wasn't until like I healed my trauma in my brain that my brain was like, "Oh yeah, this isn't the foot that caused pain. Like we can use the leg." So it's it was a lot of learning, and I had a big motivation to get back to doing the things I loved again. And I told this story to the executive director of the company that helped me learn to ski again. I was 14 weeks post-op. I had had my prosthetic for 2 whole weeks, and I told myself I could learn how to ski again. And so I started Googling like adaptive skiing in the area because I was like, I don't know how if I can use my prosthetic with my ski. I don't know how that works. Um, and I called up this local adaptive company, and they're like, "Hey, we do adaptive ski lessons. Come on up. We'll help you figure it out." And still on the crutches, still hobbling around, like can't walk, but I was determined to ski. So 2 weeks after I got my leg, I skied down a mountain, and I was like, "This is the best day ever."
Did you fall
So
at
I
all?
skied before, yeah, I skied before I could walk. So
Did you fall, or did you just make it down the first time?
oh, many a times. I
Okay.
fell down many times.
Yeah.
I was very humbled with my learning curve on that because like I grew up skiing like every other weekend, and like I was a fairly good skier before all this happened. And we started off on the magic carpet, which is like the moving treadmill up the mountain to do
Mhm.
like the tiny little like quarter hill bunny run. Oh man, let me tell you, that was a very humbling experience when these little like 2-year-olds are like going all around me, and I'm just like barely shuffling around the mountain, and I'm falling down after 5 feet. And but it was a very empowering experience, especially like not being able to walk entirely at that point. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do anything, but being able to do that, I was like, if I can do this, I can do anything.
Yeah, true.
so
Definitely. So
so
where did running come back into the picture?
that took quite some time, and it's still a work in progress. So I was about 6 months post-op when I started letting the crutches go, and I started using canes more. And I was still having issues with walking in general, but I started to just do these really short jogs, like not even like 5 feet. Like I'd jog like 5 steps, and then that would be it. And then I'd do a few more steps. And then I signed up for a 5K because I was insane and delusional at the time. And I was like, if I can ski, I can run,
If I could
which
jog
was
5 steps, I could do a 5K.
yeah, very delusional at the time. And I did this 5K, and no more than like a week before could I barely jog a mile. And so it was a challenge. It took me almost an hour to do that first 5K, which like the average time is around 35 minutes. So much more time than average. And I got done, and I just sobbed in my car, and I was like, I did it. I did it all by myself. And it was on a leg that you probably shouldn't run on because it was a very stiff foot. And so I had no energy return, but I tried. I did my best. Um, and so I just kept running. I just every day I'd get up, and even if it was a half a mile, I just got up and would run. And um, slowly over time, it got better. By the time I hit 11 months post amputation, I did my first 10K, which is about 6.2 miles. And that was a challenge. That was by and far a huge challenge, but I did it. And I regretted it a little bit just because I didn't have a running blade and I didn't have the right equipment. And so my leg really took a beating. Um, but I did it, and I was like, well, if I can keep improving, like, why not just keep trying? And so last year about this time, I got my very first running blade, and I had a running blade for what, like 2 months before I ran my first half marathon.
What's a
And
blade? What do you mean by blade?
so a running blade is like it's a carbon fiber foot that attaches to the back side of a socket. and it comes down like a C shape.
Oh, I've seen those.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so they look like they make you go faster, but they don't. um, they just give you that enough energy return so that way you're not just like driving your leg into concrete, because that's kind of what it feels like when you run on a non-running blade foot. Is it just there's no energy return, so it's basically like just slamming down into the ground.
It's probably hard on
Um,
your knees too.
it's super hard on your knees. That 10K made me take a break from running for a good few months. So,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but so I yeah, I ran my first half marathon last August. And this past Sunday I actually ran my third one. So I and it's getting better, and it's still tough. Like by and far, like some of the most difficult things I can do is run a half marathon because it is so much more challenging than when you have two functioning legs.
Yeah,
Because you have to use so much more energy just to get 90% energy return back on those running blades. Um, but it's super rewarding to do.
of course.
So,
So that was only 3 days ago. How are you feeling right now?
I haven't stopped moving. That's what I was joking with my coworkers today because I ran the half marathon on Sunday. I flew back on Monday. Monday night I had a doubleheader in beach volleyball, and then Tuesday night I played beach volleyball, and tonight I'm gonna go for another run. So I
Wow.
just don't stop moving, and it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it's like you're so excited, like that you have to just keep moving because
Yeah,
you have
exactly.
to make up for 8 years, almost 8 years, right? Without having
Yeah.
any
Oh yeah,
movement.
and that's kind of my motivation right now is like I I feel so grateful that I got a second chance at life, that every day that I'm awake is like I count it as a gift anymore, because it's like I almost wasn't here. And so being able to do these things again has been an incredible journey in itself. Um and being able to grow in my career too. I was able to find a new career shortly, about a year ago now, where I work for a prosthetic company
Oh,
where I get to help amputees go through the process and help kind of guide them through this new journey. So that way they're not alone, because like I mentioned earlier, it's like it's a very isolating feeling when you go through something like this, and not very many people understand it, but here I am with firsthand experience, and now I get to help people go through it and understand, this isn't the end for everybody. This
beginning.
is just a new beginning.
Mhm.
So
So cool. Um, Actually, I should have asked this in the beginning. So you initially just slipped, like you opened the door of your work building and just slipped like on the concrete.
yeah, there was a bunch of ice. So it is January of 2017, and at that time, like the protocol was the people working out in the facility would salt and sand the pathways, so that way those of us like myself that had to go out and work on the wastewater plant could, walk around safely. And unfortunately, they forgot to salt and sand the sidewalk coming out of our sterilization building. And so I slipped, and it was either roll my foot really hard or slide right into the wastewater. And
That's not
it
what
was, I was like, no, I don't want to be quarantined for 10 days in the hospital. Little did I know that would have probably been an easier journey. So,
wow.
but
Damn. So I hope you sued him or something. That's crazy. Or got
yeah,
workers' comp at least.
it's it's been a journey,
Yeah.
for sure. But I'm really thankful for this trajectory in my life. I know it sounds really morbid, but being able to experience that life-altering pain and trauma has allowed me to understand a lot more of what barriers other people live with on a day-to-day basis. People with more chronic conditions that live lifetimes with these diseases. It's allowed me to open my mind to understand a lot more and be more empathetic to every situation out there. So
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, Kayla, that's an incredible story. Obviously this is something that could happen to anyone. In your case, especially like literally just slipping on ice. So like kind of scares me a little. I'm going to be more careful when I walk outside during the winter. But
yeah.
if you had one piece of advice you'd give to someone who, I know it's a rare disease, but it's someone who went through something similar, what would be that piece of advice you'd give?
Um, I think the best advice that I got in my journey was from my therapist. Instead of taking it day by day, take it minute by minute. Because if you can remind yourself to take 10 deep breaths for a minute, you can make it through the next minute and just focus on minute by minute. Breaking down, like all you have to do is just breathe. Um, it was one of the most crucial pieces of advice that I got. And I remind people of that, just breathe, because you may not find relief today or tomorrow, but one day something's going to get better. And so just take it minute by minute.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla. How can people follow your journey? Are you on social media or anything?
Yeah, so on Instagram and TikTok, I am have the handle the happy amputee.
Mhm.
Um and so if people want to follow my journey, I post a lot about educational stuff for going through, like, how do you keep your leg cool when you're sweating and you have to wear these prosthetic liners and they're awful sometimes. I post about my running journeys, the advocacy work I get to do with my company, Evergreen Prosthetics and Orthotics. I um, post a lot of try to be a comedian sometimes. So I try to do that sometimes as well. So, and then there's a good mix of my dogs in there too.
Oh, beautiful. Nice mix of everything. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us and telling your story.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Everyone else, thank you for listening to another Fighter Heart podcast, and we will see you again next week.